Hello. If you've taken a commercial flight any time in the last 50 years, you're probably familiar with the safety briefing where a flight attendant or a video description giving a safety brief will tell you in the event of a decompression and the deployment of oxygen masks, put your mask on first and assist children and others later. There's a good reason for that. Decompression, particularly explosive decompression, is very, very, very rare. It's very rare that a window or door rips out of an airplane and people and objects are sucked out of it. That happens more in the movies than in real life. But in any case, any airplane can experience a decompression. It can be explosive. It can be very gradual. It could be a malfunction with the cabin pressure controller of the aircraft systems. It doesn't happen much in modern aircraft, but I dealt with it a couple times in my flying life. The reason that you have to have oxygen, that everyone should have oxygen, is to mitigate the negative effects that a lack of oxygen can have. It's actually most crucial for the aircrew, particularly the pilots, to have their oxygen on. You may not know it, but pilots have ready sources of oxygen available to them at all times. Everyone has quick dying oxygen masks that can be placed on the head where you get 100% oxygen right away. That's important because when we lack oxygen, another factor comes into play: time of useful consciousness. At high altitudes, where most airliners fly, the time of useful consciousness above 30,000 feet, if you have the atmosphere now at 30,000 feet, is maybe a minute, maybe a few seconds. So we're trained basically in the case of a exceedance of the established cabin altitude to put on oxygen 100% right away, and everything flows from that. If you're a passenger, the mask will deploy, you pull them out, and the oxygen flows smoothly. At the same time, if that ever happens in real life, the crew is not going to stay there. They're going to descend. There is a requirement that every aircraft be able, flying at high altitudes or any altitude, be able to descend down to an altitude of 14,000 feet within 4 minutes. So if you take a typical flight that's perhaps up in the troposphere, it's around, say, 34,000 feet. You're saying that it would have to descend 20,000 feet to get to 14 in 4 minutes. 20,000 feet, 4 minutes, I would be coming down to 5,000 feet per minute. That would be the rate of descent, which is quite doable, quite achievable. If the aircrew is faced with that, they would be coming down rather quickly. Of course, they would have to know the terrain and how far they could go. They can't just go down to the end of the earth. If you've got mountains at 15,000 feet, well, then you don't want to go down to 14,000 feet or 10,000 feet. You'll never get there for obvious reasons. So terrain is a factor. As long as you can get below 30 or 25,000 feet, you'll be okay. And it's important for physical capabilities for everyone, but for passengers, you can experience hypoxia, loss of consciousness, have problems with your bodily functions, a certain amount of shock stress. Extreme cases, you might get the bends that divers are known to have gotten if there's too quick of a transition from one cabin to the other, cabin altitude to the other. But normally, airliners keep the cabin altitude somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 feet. The more modern airplanes are probably closer to the 6,000 foot elevation, which is approximately the elevation of Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've spent a lot of time there. That's fine. That's why you're comfortable. If it suddenly goes up to 30,000 feet, then you're gonna lose consciousness very, very quickly. So when the airplane's down at a safe altitude, you'll be good to go, and they'll probably tell you when you can take off your oxygen mask if you can. And again, it's very rare that that ever happens, but the reason is that you operate in a pressurized cabin for passenger comfort. The lower they can get that cabin altitude, the more comfortable people are. But anyway, that'll probably never happen to you. But should you have a problem, just put the oxygen mask on. Also, there is a restriction on pilots when flying above 25,000 feet and one pilot leaves his or her duty station to use a restroom or whatever. The other pilot has to have oxygen on and be breathing it. If there's a single pilot at the controls, he or she has to have pure oxygen on just in case something happens suddenly. Anyway, that's all for today. Flying is safe, but for those who may be a little nervous, I've made a little freebie for you. It's called the Nervous Flyer Survival Guide. Just check in the description below the video, and it's yours for free. Bye-bye.